Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan.
The Honorable, the Supervisor of English Medical Society, Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya, Mr. Benedicta.
The Honorable, the President of English Debating Society, Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya 2026, Muhammad Ahimsa.
The Honorable Chairman of this National Event Seminar 2026, Muhammad Hussein Al-Asif.
The Honorable, all the participants of National Debate Seminar 2026 from across Indonesia. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome each of you to the National Debate Seminar 2026.
My name is Muhammad Khalil and my partner,
Amelia Krisna Mutiara.
It's our pleasure to be your master of ceremony for today.
Ladies and gentlemen, to formally begin our event for today, we would like to invite everyone for singing the national anthem of Indonesia. Indonesia Raya and Mars Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya. Ladies and gentlemen, this time is yours.
Indonesia tanah airku, tanah tumpah darahku. Di sanalah aku berdiri, jadi pandu ibuku. Indonesia kebangsaanku, bangsa dan tanah airku. Marilah kita bersatu, Indonesia bersatu. Hiduplah tanahku, hiduplah negeriku, bangsaku, rakyatku semuanya. Bangunlah jiwanya, bangunlah badannya untuk Indonesia Raya. Indonesia yang merdeka, merdeka, tanahku, negeriku yang ku cinta. Indonesia yang merdeka, merdeka, hiduplah Indonesia Raya. Indonesia yang merdeka, merdeka, tanahku, negeriku yang ku cinta. Indonesia yang merdeka, merdeka, hiduplah Indonesia Raya. Warga Politeknik, sosonglah masa depan. Sebagai generasi muda, curahkan daya demi kemakmuran bangsa. Kobarkan semangat dalam belajar untuk berkarya, berperan dalam pembangunan bagi Indonesia Jaya. Berdasar Pancasila UUD 45, pedoman misi Tridharma. Amalkan keterampilan, kembangkan pengetahuan, teknologi terdapat. Jaga kedisiplinan, menghadapi tantangan, singkirkan segala rintangan. Keberhasilan akan datang, masa depan Indonesia pastikan cemerlang. bagi Indonesia Jaya. Berdasar Pancasila UUD 45, pedoman disiplin dharma. Amalkan keterampilan, kembangkan pengetahuan, teknologi terapan. Jaga kedisiplinan, menghadapi tantangan, singkirkan segala rintangan. Keberhasilan kan datang, masa depan Indonesia pastikan cemerlang.
Our national, ladies and gentlemen, after the speech, our national anthem and Mas Bapak Negeri Sriwijaya, we now move on to the next session. It is time to hear the report from the chairman of this national debate seminar,
Muhammad Hussein Farsi.
Okay, am I audible? Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Supervisor, Mr. Benny Wijaya, Honorable Speaker, Ms. Jocelyn Tay, Honorable Speaker, Mr. Marvin Tandy, and all dear participants on the National Debate Seminar 2026. First of all, let us thank God for His blessings so we can gather here today in this amazing event. And on behalf of this organizing committee, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our amazing speaker, Ms. Jocelyn Tay and Mr. Marvin Tandy for being present today and for sharing their valuable knowledge and experience. We are truly honored and excited to learn from such an amazing speaker. I would also like to thank all participants for their enthusiasm and their active participation in this event. Your presence make this event truly meaningful, and my deepest appreciation to the entire committee team. They work so hard tirelessly behind the scene to ensure the seminar runs smoothly. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to briefly report on today's seminar participation. The National Debate Seminar 2026 is attended by university and high school across Indonesia. The majority of the participants came from Palembang and other regions within Sumatra, while significant number of the participants came from outside Sumatra, this reflecting the truly meaningful of this seminar, the national scope of this seminar. From the total of number of the participants, some of them are from high school students, while the rest are the university students and other. This shows that the spirit of this debate and critical thinking continues to grow across the different educational level. And we sincerely apologize if there are any mistakes or shortcomings during the preparation or throughout the course of today's event. We truly appreciate your understanding and welcome any constructive feedback for our improvement in the future. The seminar is organized to help us develop critical thinking skill, practice fair and analytic reasoning, and express our confident manner. And we hope that through this seminar, the participant will feel more confident to speak up, share your ideas, and continue to grow as a debater and critical thinker. May today's seminar serve as a meaningful starting point for all of us to keep learning, improving, and serving for experience. Lastly, I hope you all enjoy this seminar and gain valuable insight from our speaker. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, after hearing the report from the chairman, we would like to invite the president of English Debating Society Polytechnic BP Sriwijaya 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, Muhammad Hamza.
Hello, am I audible? Uh, I think I think I'm audible. So good morning, everyone. The Honorable our Supervisor, Mr. Benny Wijaya, the Honorable Leader of Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya, and all of the staff, and the Honorable Chairman of the committee and all committee members, and don't forget all participants of this national debate seminar. First of all, let us thank God for the opportunity so that we can gather here today through Zoom in good health and comfort. On behalf of UKM EDS Policy, it is a pleasure for us to hold this national debate seminar today. And today, we are accompanied by two great speakers, Kak Jose and Kak Melvin, who have a lot of experience in debate. This seminar aims to help all of improve our critical thinking and speaking skills through debate. Since debate is not only about winning, and but also about sharing ideas and respecting each other by understanding different opinions. I would like to say thank you to our speakers, all committee members, and all parties involved for their hard work and support. I hope this seminar will be useful and inspiring for all our participants. And lastly, uh, I would like to I would like to apologize for any mistakes during the event. And thank you for your attention. Enjoy the seminar and good morning.
And now, to formally open our event for today, we are honored to present the opening and welcoming speech from Supervisor of English Debate Society Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya, the SST, Mr. Benny Wijaya.
The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope that I'm clearly audible and visible to you. Good morning to all of you as the participants, especially our keynote speakers today, Jose and Marvin, and the high school students and university students who are taking a part in it. And I'm just very happy that more than 300 people attending this seminar or registering in this seminar coming from all over Indonesia, not only from Sumatra, but I saw the list that some of you come from Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and we're very happy to have you all here this morning and also the high school and university students. So on behalf of the debate club, it is my great honor and heartfelt pleasure to welcome all of you to our national seminar held in conjunction with this year's open recruitment. So basically, this seminar is intended to celebrate our 2026 open recruitment. And your presence today is not just appreciated, but it is powerful. It reflects curiosity, courage, and the willingness to grow together. I would like to say thank you to Hussein, Balkis, Nabil, Ahim, Ifan, and team who have organized this seminar successfully, and all the EDS members who have participated as the committees. My deepest gratitude to you. Our theme, Elevate as Beginners with World-Class Keynote Speakers, carries a message that is deeply personal to every one of us. Every speaker you admire today, Jose and also Marvin, once stood exactly where you stand now as a beginner. So you're still unsure, you're still curious, perhaps even nervous, but you are willing to learn, to debate. To our high school students, you are at the beginning of a remarkable journey. This is the perfect time, okay, to cultivate confidence and critical thinking. To our university students, you are stepping into greater responsibility as thinkers, as leaders, and as role models for the next generation. And to all of you, this is the proof that beginners belong in rooms of excellence today. You do not need to be perfect to start. Okay, you only need to be brave enough to begin by learning from this seminar. The seminar is an invitation to join a community that challenges you, supports you, believes in your potential even before you fully see it yourself. Our debate club is not just an extracurricular activity, it is a training ground for leadership, integrity, and intellectual courage. So we um, hold this seminar. This is our second one. Previously, we had Hans and Feli as our speakers in a Pepsi Poultry English Festival that we hold every year. So I hope that you learn and build network beyond your school or university through this seminar. Share your ideas, challenge your perspectives, and most importantly, allow yourself to grow together. May today mark the beginning of your elevation, not just as debaters, but as thinkers and leaders who are ready to contribute meaningfully to society. So, welcome to the National Seminar. Thank you so much for Jose and Marvin who have spent their time to be our keynote speakers. And I hope you all enjoy and learn from them. And welcome to Grow. Welcome to the future debaters. Okay, I think that's all. Have a great day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ladies and gentlemen, to commemorate this special event, we would like to invite everyone for please open your camera for the photograph station. Our documentation then will guide the moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're finally here at the main session of today's event, the National Debate Seminar 2026 with Josephine and Martin.
This seminar, ladies and gentlemen, is designed to broaden our perspective to winning debates processes as well as developing the qualities of an excellent educator, empowering us to elevate our academic and personal potential.
Before we proceed, we kindly remind for all participants to fill in the attended form to the link that provided in the chat box. Untuk seluruh peserta, sebelum kita memulai kegiatan, diingatkan ke dapat mengisi link absen yang telah disediakan di kolom chat.
And now, to guide us through this live station, it is our great honor to invite the moderator of today's seminar, an inspiring teacher. Please welcome the president of English Debating Society, Polytechnic University Jaya 2025. Welcome, Mr.
Okay, am I audible, everyone? Okay. Thank you so much, Amel and Kadafi, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to the National Debate Seminar with UKM Media Polsri. I'm Balkis Cahayakatsar, and I will be the moderator for today. Right now, we are very honored to have two distinguished keynote speakers with us. They are Jocelyn Tay and Marvin Tandy, who will share their insight with the topic, Basic of Debate for Beginners, a Gateway to Critical Thinking and Confident Speaking, and Learning to Judge from Zero, Foundations of Fair and Logical Debate Education. Also, before we start the seminar, please pay attention to the presentation because at the end of each speaker session, we will have an exciting question and answer session, and two participants who have best questions for each speaker will get amazing door prize. Okay, without any further ado, let's welcome our first speaker today, Jocelyn Tay, and I believe that she is joining the Zoom meeting now. Please give her a moment for a second. I'm sure that she will be pinned into the Zoom when she is already here. Okay. Hello, Kak Jose.
Hello, hi everyone from Poltek Sriwijaya as well as the other audience. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Kak Jose. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are very excited to learn about debate together with you. Okay, before any further ado, everyone, with the topic Basic of Debate for Beginners, a gateway to critical thinking and confident speaking. Please welcome Jocelyn Tay. The screen is yours, Kak Jose.
Thank you, Balkis, for the introduction. So good morning, everyone. Let me just share my screen for a bit. So we're going to talk today for on the topics of basic of debate for beginners. This is just a topic that was brought up from the Poltek Sriwijaya team. So I'll try my best to try to convey what can be shared in terms of critical thinking and how confident speaking can be learned through debating. Yeah, I hope that my screen is visible now. Can someone confirm if my screen is visible now?
Your screen is visible, Kak.
Okay, great. Right. Let me just start real quick. Okay. Right. Just sorry for a bit of the technical difficulties. All right. So good morning, everyone. Let me just reintroduce myself. My name is Josente. My friends usually call me Jose, actually. So if you feel comfortable, you can also call me Jose. So today we're going to talk on the basic of debate for beginners. This is not just a debate 101. So I'll be just mostly talking on the important things that we can have in a debate, as well as my personal journey and how I hope that that can be a reference for each of you that probably want to start this journey in debating. So let's start off, because what is debate without structure? There are three key things that I want to talk about today. Firstly is just the basic of what is debating about. Secondly is what are the key elements of a debate that most importantly need to be addressed when you are debating that is valued by the judges. And lastly will be what are the debating experience that I've gone through. It has been around, maybe around 4 years since my first debating journey, and what are the lessons that I've learned. I think that this hopefully can help you guys to, pick things up more in a debate journey. All right, let's just start off with the first thing, right? What is debating? Just to give you an overview, so I just created reference to different definition of what is a debate about. But the key things that we want to highlight is that debating is basically a structured exchange of opposing views on a motion. So it's not just the debat kusir that you often listen or often thought about, but it's a structured exchange. This means that each speaker have a dedicated time, have a dedicated role that they have to present when they are challenged in a government or opposition. That's important because this makes you understand what is the expectation when you are doing a debate, because you need to be a bit more structured to make sure that the judge can fully comprehend what is your case about, what is the whether your stance is clear or not. So this is why when you are debating, you need to take a clear stance. You will also need to require certain reasoning and comparison to persuade the audience. So if I can summarize, like, being a debater means that you have to be able to persuade the audience. This is really important because later I want to highlight why the understanding of having the believe that you have to persuade the audience will require you to be confident first so that you're able to persuade the audience. So if you're not really familiar with what are the different formats in debating, there are three key formats that is commonly seen when you are debating as a varsity. So I'm just assuming that most of you here are coming from university level. So we will be debating in a varsity level. Three formats that is kind of different in terms of the number of speakers, speaking time, and POI. So firstly, we have Asian parliamentary. The type of competition that commonly seen here is if later you're going to participate, it's either ALSA UI or general common debates that involve 3-on-3. It's mostly using our Asian parliamentary. We will have 7 minutes to speak, and you are allowed POI. What is POI? POI is point of information. So if you've seen, I think there are a lot of TikTok circulating saying like interrupsi. Those are the POIs that actually we are expecting. So on government, you will have PM, Prime Minister, DPM, Deputy Prime Minister, and Government Whip. The unique thing about Asian parliamentary is you'll have reply speaker. So the speaking time is around half, as well as the scoring is also half of the usual speech. So it's just government reply and opposition reply. So you can see from the picture here that the flow of the debate is coming from PM, and then LO will speak first, DPM, DLO, government whip, opposition whip, and then opposition reply, and then last is government reply. So this I want to give this kind of picture to understand why this eventually become a very structured exchange when you are debating a motion. So second, that's it for Asian parliamentary. And then secondly, for British parliamentary, the type of format that is used in NUDC. In WUDC, we are using British parliamentary, where one team is only composing of two members per team. So this is kind of one of the most common format for varsity team, because this is what we use for WUDC too. WUDC is World University Debating Championship. So it's kind of like one of the biggest tournament that is hold for the varsity teams, right? So here we have opening government, opening opposition, closing government, and closing opposition. So each of these teams, even though you are in the same government and opposition, you will compete against each other. So usually as a closing team, you will want to make sure that your case is still winning over the opening bench. So you are still having the same stance, but you have to compare as to why your team is at least presenting a better case than the opening. So in this case, you will also still have 7 minutes time, and you're still allowed POI. Lastly, we will have Australasian parliamentary. It's usually just called Australs for easier. And it's used in IVAT, actually, in the competition that is happening, I think right now, at least they're still ongoing for IVAT. So for IFAT, it's also similar, just different terms. You have 1A, one affirmative, and one negative on oppositions. So it's kind of similar to Asian parliamentary, but this time you will have to speak for 8 minutes, and you're not allowed to have any sort of POI in the end. So that's basically the different formats that we have for varsity basically. There's actually one more format that is commonly used more on NSDC, or like the schools, nationals, world schools level. It's similar to Asian parliamentary, but you just speak 8 minutes in the end, and it's a kind of different scoring. But yeah, if you are debating as a varsity, these three formats is the important thing that you need to familiarize with. All right, I hope that it's clear for the introduction. I'm just going to jump directly to the key important things that you need to have in a debate, right? So I'm just going to start directly with urgency. Urgency is, I feel, most important thing that you can have to make sure that the judge kind of feel that your case is relevant enough to be debated. Why is that so? Because when you have urgency, you have the push to come up with either proposal or come up with why this narrative or why this view is something that need to be taken action to, and why this is something that is relevant enough to be debated. So what you need to do when you have an urgency is that you want to show how the problem actually exists in the status quo, and how it will get worse or is going to be affecting a lot more people if nothing more changes. So the first thing that I like to do when I try to find the urgency of a motion is that first I try to identify the problem. So identifying the problem comes with either understanding what is the context of this motion as made. So for example, when you have a motion, you try to correlate this to real life, for example, because I think when the judges are making this kind of motion, most likely they try to find what is the problem that is currently relevant, what is the thought process that they try to imagine the debate to happen. So you don't want to think of a motion that, based on either the definition of the motion itself. So you don't want to focus on just the dictionary definition, but you want to focus on what is the exact relevant issue that is happening in status quo right now. I'm going to give the example of certain motion that we can discuss, but but just basically on the first thing that I try to identify is that I want to make sure that the problem actually exists in the status quo. So right now. And then secondly, when the problem exists, I didn't just stop at, okay, this problem exists, but why is status quo not enough? And why eventually it's something that is harmful. So this push you to think, what is the harm that is happening right now if you do not take action? So when you have this kind of urgency, it's going to allow you to build more on that. So you try to analyze what is the things that you can do more, what is the thing that need to be tackled, or what need to be proposed, or what need to be challenged in the status quo to make sure that you are able to win the case, right? So this for government, but for opposition, you try to prove otherwise. You try to prove that, okay, status quo is enough, and the harm that is given by the proposition, for example, is something that's not valid. Or the second approach that you can do is also you can say, okay, maybe status quo is not enough, but when you took a certain action that is proposed by the government, it's going to make things even harmful, even worse. So this is the different dynamic that you have as a proposition, as a government, as an opposition, is that you try to just challenge each other whether the issue that is proposed by government is something that is valid or not. Even if it's something that is valid, for example, why their proposed alternative is something that is not enough, something that is harmful eventually. So you try to flip that on their side of the house. Yeah, so that's basically the second thing that I do when I already identified the problem. And then lastly, after you know that the analysis that you brought is already able to prove why the status quo is not enough, why your proposal is something that is very, is going to tackle this. Lastly, you have to link back. So this tries to make sure that the proposed idea that you brought. So for example, either your proposal, your mechanism, or for example, the benefit that you brought is something that is relevant to the stance or to the harm or problem that has been identified before. So I think this is sometimes a bit of an issue when you are unable to link back, because sometimes when I see when I was also debating in the past, the problem was that I was able to identify the problem, I was able to identify why something is harmful, but eventually the judge feel that the proposal or the solution that I thought was not clearly linked enough as to why it can tackle the problem. So it's really important to show that why the urgency here to make sure that the policy or the stance that you're taking right now is something that's important and really relevant to now. So to the status quo that you have proposed, to the issue that you have talked about before, it's really important to link back. So make sure that you're able to understand that, right? Okay, so that's the theory. Let's move to the example and how this can contextualize better in terms of certain motion. So I have a motion here, and I really encourage everyone to be involved and type it in the chat. Maybe if you have certain views that you want to try when you make this urgency. So this house opposes the glorification of remote working as the main decision factor when choosing a workplace. So this is actually a motion that I debated in NUDC in 2023. So I think this is something that is still relevant in current case, basically. So maybe if we can talk about this. based on the framework that I have explained before. So we're going to start first in government's case, right? How do we dissect this? What is the problem in the status quo, right? When you see this motion, this house opposes the glorification of remote working as the main decision factor when choosing a workplace. So when you imagine the core education panel to come up with the motion, I think there's something that back in 2023, or I think even until right now, there's a lot of discussion on, I have found a remote work here, and then for the especially like the young professionals, the Gen Zs, to feel that okay, maybe I don't need to go to office in a 9 to 5 job. I need to can manage my own time. I can, for example, find a remote job that can pays me well, but I don't need to rely on the traditional ways of working, right? So if we try to relate this to problem, I think it's a bit of counterintuitive to sometimes when there's a lot of norm happening to try to question on what is the problem in status quo. But if you can try to understand and look what is probably the problem that is happening when you are doing this kind of remote working, right? You can do it, I think it's easier for you to approach it in two levels. First, you can do it in individual level. Secondly, you can do it in a societal level. So because this glorification of remote working can work in an individual level, i.e. how this affect the individual when they're taking the option, how they influence when they're taking this decision in the end, or secondly, how does this impact how the society works? So for example, what kind of regulation that exists when you have this kind of norm, when you have this kind of glorification, what kind of action that are taken by the third parties, such as the companies, such as the the people around you or the individual itself. So those kind of things are the that kind of like the different levers that you can take when you try to come up with different problems. So just to quickly answer, I think that the government on government, you can say that in individual level, you are going to, when this glorification happens, it actually makes people to overshadow other factors, such as the number of like the level of wage that they're able to take, or for example, in terms of accessibility, how they're able to make sure that the work or the job option that is taken is something that can make you is only accessible to people who are privileged. For example, when you are able to work in an environment in a remote work, first that means that you need to have a good internet. For example, you need to have a good device to make sure that you don't mess up when there's a team meeting, or when you are in a conducive environment that allows you to work in that kind of when you are allowed to work in a remote job. This means that people who don't have access to that is going to be they're going to be secluded, right? They're going to be kind of discriminated, because when you put this as a main deciding factor, you cannot help these people in the end. So that's why this glorification is bad, because now when a lot of people are just glorifying, oh yeah, I just got a remote job here and there, this means that people who are choosing to go to a traditional workplace, they're going to be either thought that they are not progressive enough, for example, or they're not smart enough to be able to land to a remote job. So those kind of things that can happen, it makes the certain urgency or problem to exist in the status quo. Second thing, then, after you identify that, okay, in individual level, it makes me as a person, for example, to think only of, okay, I can work anywhere, I can just manage my own time, for example, but it's okay if I don't have enough, rights that I have, because eventually people are not working together in a like labor union, like what they have in traditional working space, or for example, oh, it's okay for me, I don't need to commute, but it's okay for me to work in environment that that allows me to do this kind of remote working, but eventually it only comes to overcrowding places like Bali, or overcrowding places that in like urban countries, urban cities eventually. So in the end, it's just something that creates more problem as opposed to solving the transport problem, right? So what is status quo not enough, and why is it harmful, right? So because it's glorified, that means that because of glorification, it means that the kind of narrative that is pushed is encouraging people to make a short-term comfort-based decision that can limit their ability to find mentorship, their ability to find a better skill that can allows them to develop their skills better, or for example, a long-term career progression, because they only focus on remote job. That means that there's not as much of a structure or a chance for them to be promoted. So the kind of benefits or the kind of structure that is usually provided in a usual corporate job. So for example, when you have to go to work in office, it means that it allows you to talk, to network, to basically discuss on what can be your future career path, etc. So the kind of learning or mentorship that you usually get when you are working in a co-working space, when in your office, for example, meeting face to face, as opposed to just doing your job individually in a scattered and in a different remote place. This is something that is glorified in the end. So that's why you are encouraged. These individuals are the people who are encouraged to do so, and that's why in the long term they cannot think of that really clearly, and that's why this glorification is something that you need to oppose in the end. So second layer that you can also take is that this is harmful because it will limit the access to only people, privileged people who have access to internet, who have the environment that is conducive enough. And that's why the identification problem that exists before is something that you don't want to happen in the end on government. That's why you are trying to oppose this as your main deciding factor, right? So the link back that you need to take is that trying to clarify that by opposing this glorification, it means that you push people to evaluate workplace more holistically. So it's not just on the remote working as the main deciding factor, but it also evaluate based on the wages, the environment, the career progression, a lot of different consideration that you can take when you are deciding a workplace. So it will this will benefit the individuals, because now you will have a better decision making, as opposed to some narrative that is pushed by the society, but instead it's because the individual has decided to do so due to a lot of different factors that is suited to them individually, and also in a societal level. It means that you are able to build a culture where people are not shamed for their choice of deciding a certain factor, and when they are having a lot of different type of work, they're okay to do so. So that's basically what we can do for government. On opposition, the counter, the otherwise. So you're trying to prove that either it's not urgent. Firstly, the thing that you can do is just trying to dismiss that, okay, it's something that's not urgent, because the problem that is stated by government is not true, right? Because of course, when you are working in opposition, when you're working in, even though you remote job, you still try to provide, because the company still want to ensure a certain level of productivity. So you of course still provide a lot of different structure, or you provide courses, just to make sure that these people are still growing and can produce, can be more productive when they are working with you as a company. So just to kind of dismissing the government, not dismissing, just to engage that the government's harm or status quo issue that they want to talk about is something that's not harmful and has been mitigated in the status quo. But also secondly, you try to say, right? So even though in status quo, this kind of problem does exist, the problem is that it's not that people are not aware, are not doing anything, but because people are not aware of what is actually needed for a person when you are working remotely. That means that you are going to show that as a person who do remote job, you're going to be you need a good internet service, you need a conducive area. So this is going to push the people to be aware of when this kind of job exists, when remote job exists, remote working exists. That is why we need to normalize this, so that we can give a lot of more people, like when a lot of people do this, the thought process is that when a lot of more people do it, when it's glorified, that is when it start being regulated. because a lot of more people demanded that, more of people are aware of their rights and they want to be treated as the usual workers, right? So that's why this glorification on opposition is something that's necessary, because you want to make sure that the government or the company or the people are aware that, oh, when I'm doing a remote job, it's not like I'm not working, but it's when I still do my job and I need a certain benefit or other than benefit, but also the infrastructure to be able to sustain my job. So this is something that can only exist when you have this glorification in the end. Secondly, when you try to counter governments talking about accessibility, it's only access for those who are privileged, who are working in Bali, for example. You try to what you can do as opposition is that okay, but the problem is on both sides, the type of this kind of job still exists, right? On both sides, regardless you glorify this or not, the remote work is still going to happen. But when you don't glorify this, it means that less people are going to know about it. And that is when governments claim to be talking about limiting the accessibility is going to happen. Why? Because now only people who work in, who are living in Bali or who are living in Jakarta or only living in, privileged areas who have access to internet are the only ones who can access this job, because company will only find those will only find the people that coming from those kind of areas that can be hired. So when you glorify this means that a lot of more people is going to take this kind of remote job, or at least the government, the company is going to have more awareness to hire a lot more people, because if remote job is something that's more glorified, it means that the company will spend less time to want to buy office tables or provide office building. They don't need an office building to operate, right? So this kind of information makes the company to want to spend the money that they usually spend on transport or utilities to be hiring more people. So when they know that the barrier of entry for hiring people is that, oh, I don't need to buy them, I don't need to pay them transport fees, or I don't need them, for example, to be in an office building, for example. We can just work remotely for each of our team, and then I can give them a lot more wages in that case to compensate for that. But also because now I can hire even and outsource this to a lot more people that does not really have to come from Bali, or does not have to come from places with good internet service, for example. I can just hire people that come from other regions that even though they are underprivileged, for example, coming from rural areas, but if they have the high skill people to do so, that means it's okay for the company to do so. So that's why when you hire, when you glorify this will give an incentive for the company to want to hire more. And that's when you try to challenge that, oh, the issue that is coming from government is something that will only be fixed when it comes on our side of the house. So it's something that you try to flip on opposition side of the house, why you can, for example, have this better leverage when you glorify this, and you're going to put this to the attention of the public. So that's why they want to do this as their agenda. So lastly, is that what it can link back to why it matters now on opposition is that because if you are not doing this glorification, it means that you shame the individuals who are doing the decision of those who actually need this kind of job, right? For example, you can play on the vulnerable side, like the mother who cannot leave their children, but they still need to work. The only way for them to do so is when they do remote working, or high-skilled people that come from rural area that cannot relocate or don't have the money to commute, for example. Now they can do their job in their desa or in their villages, for example, and they're only able to do that when you glorify that, oh, it's really important to consider the remote working as the factor. So that is why on government side of the house, you try to challenge and say that, oh, this is something that limit the access. This is something that is problem because it makes people to just normalize the idea of you are someone who is, if you are someone who is doing remote working, for example, you cannot do anything, or for example, it's only access to the privileged people. On opposition, you try to okay, I agree that this kind of issue happened, but what is happening on your side is something that is even worse or is not going to fix the problem in the end. So that's what we try to do when you are building urgency, right? I hope that's clear. Right. So I'm just going to go directly to the burdens. So I think that this has been implicitly mentioned when I was, explaining on the urgency. But basically, when you're doing a argument, there are three key things that you want to address. So the kind of burden that you want to do in a certain claim, firstly is on the logical claim. Secondly is on the motion-based burden, and lastly is you want to do a comparison or framings. So in terms of logical burdens, it's basically just assessing the argument on its own. So is the claim actually true? What are the impacts? What are they likely to happen? So when you try to take this kind of argument, or when you try to build this argument, you try to ask, okay, why is this true? Why is this likely to happen? And then so what after I do this kind of so what after I brought this kind of claims in the end, right? So that's basically just to simplify it, is that logical burden is to make sure that the argument that you thought is something that is true or something that is sound in the end, to make sure that the judge was able to buy it. But secondly, on the motion-based burden is that when you extend this, okay, if this argument in itself is something that is true, why is that still relevant to the motion that we are talking about? So for example, when the motion talks earlier on the glorification, are you actually addressing the glorification, or are you just assessing on the remote working itself? So I think there's a bit of a common mistake that comes when you are unable to really put relevancy to the motion of to the motion itself, is that when you are able to you are able to pinpoint the problem, you're able to bring out a good argument, but eventually it focuses on the wrong only on a certain part of the motion instead of the motion as a whole. So the common mistake, for example, on the glorification of remote working is that you only talk about remote working, but you don't talk about glorification. You don't talk about how this impacts society as a whole, when that is the burden of the motion, to talk about the glorification and why you should oppose or support it. So that is the burden that you want to talk about in a motion-based burden. But lastly is on the comparison or framing, right? So I think there's something that might takes a bit more time to adjust for you to do so, is that when you are able to compare or frame this kind of argument, you want to claim, okay, why is this more important than the other team's claim? And that's why, for example, in this kind of motion, in the example of the motion, so this house believes that the concept of forgiveness being a virtue is obsolete. The claim here is that you want to make sure that it's something that is harmful because it prejudices a victim being seen by society, and this shifts accountability away from the perpetrator onto the victim, which reduces deterrence and preventing future harm. So reduce deterrence, preventing future harm is something that you want to compare. This is why it's very important. The claim of it's true is that, okay, it's harmful because it prejudices the victim. So that's what we want to talk about when it's a burden, right? One of the type that need to be done when you are understanding the burden of the motion is that you need to make sure that you understand what is the type of the motion. So there are 4 types that can be generalized: policy, value judgment, history revision, and actor. So in this case, when you do policy motion, it means that you need to think from the perspective on authority. So you need to create some sort of modeling or operationalization, because you want to make sure that, okay, how am I going to act this policy? How am I going to, take this kind of action when it's the state or when it's like a bigger actor to do so. On value judgment, this is similar to the opposers glorification earlier, is that you want to make sure that the harm or the benefit outweighs the counter one. So the good outweighs the bad, right? In this case, you want to prioritize because you want to make sure why this harm or certain benefit outweighs the other one. So that's why you need to analyze on that. History revision, this one, you are going to understand this better when you start in a debate as well. But when the history revision, it means that either first you go to the you require a counterfactual, right? Because you want to compare why this something is something that should be regretted, or why you prefer a certain word where it's a reset in the end. So the different burden that comes here is that you want to focus on the counterfactual or on the comparative itself. So it requires you to make sure why this kind of action is something that should not be done in the end, in the beginning of time or in the certain period that it was done. Lastly, as actor motion, basically it's another different actor. So other than the state, it specifies which actor that they're going to talk about. So it's basically a combination of policy, value judgment, and history, but you talk on the perspective of the specific actor, so it values based on their incentive, their capacity, and their responsibility. Okay, lastly is on the important things on engaging. So I think that there are two key things that you can do as rebuttals. So firstly is that you can talk, so there are two engagement that I can say. The important thing of debating is not just you delivering, but you need to make sure, especially this is for like the later speaker, so second speaker and third speaker. That means that other speaker has spoken before you, right? So you have to be engaging, you have to be aware of what are the things that is happening in the debate. So debate has to be dynamic, so you don't just talk about the case that you have prepared in the case building, but you listen to your opponents when they're bringing their materials, for example. So you want to make sure that firstly, you have a direct engagement. So this is what we call rebuttals. So when you engage to the opponents, what they have what, for example, engaging with if they are if their current claim is still standing in the end, why is something that is still relevant or not relevant in the end? So firstly, what you need to do here is that you need to you need to start from neutralizing. So why the opponent's claim is something that is not true, but also secondly, even if it's something that is true, why yours is something that is better, why theirs are weaker, unrealistic, or less convincing than what you have brought. But also lastly is that you try to flip why saying that their weakness is something that makes you to be winning this debate. So it's worse on their side, it's better on your side. So you try to, you want to make sure that rebuttal does not just end with them being neutral. So it's not just that, okay, they're wrong, and then so what? Because that's the issue, right? When you try to rebut, most of the time you only stop at, okay, I can neutralize their claims, but you don't really claim why your case is something that is standing and why it's really more, it benefits your case in the end when they're brought those kind of claims. So as I can highlight, value neutrality is not an outright benefit in the end. Okay, there's an extra thing that you can do as an engagement. So it's not just rebutting your opponents, but you also weigh in it. So you try to highlight why you still win, right? Why comparatively you are someone who your team is winning this case. So the first thing that you can do is that you can compare the outcome of both sides. Outcome does not necessarily mean impact, but also, what are the harms, what are the benefit, all those kind of comparison that you want to, pull yourself aside and see, okay, on government, they talk about this, on opposition, you talk about this. Secondly, you ask, what is the outcome that matters more? Matters most means, what I have mentioned in the burden. So whether there's something that is logically more true or something that is more relevant to the debate or something that, more relevant to the judges kind of weighing, and why, and lastly, you show why your work is better overall. So the type of weighing that you likely can compare is that how much likely is your case compared to their case, because because of the process that you have proven. So the type of likelihood that you have already thought makes your case more convincing. Or for example, your case have brought more benefits compared to their side, or more harms compared to their side. And or for example, the harm on their side is more compared to your benefit. And for example, you have more protection of the vulnerable individuals. So those kind of comparative or the weighing that you can highlight to the judges shows why your case is likely to win. So that's basically what I have on the materials. What are the key important things that we can do for the individual, for when you are structuring a debate? So you start from urgency, and then you try to come up with different arguments that fulfills the different burdens. So the logical burden, the motion burden, and then the weighing and the comparative burden. And then lastly is also why you're debating. You need to engage through rebuttals and through weighings. Okay, just very quickly, I just want to share what are my personal journey, how I, started off my speech and in the 5 minutes. So this was really back in 2021. That was basically the first speech that I've done for British parliamentary. And then how I ended up having an 82 speech in World University Debating Championship, right? So as much as I want to say, I have a quick tip to achieve this. But unfortunately for me, it requires a lot of process as well as training. So for example, in this period of time when I was preparing for the competition, basically all weekend was booked with prep comms. We call it prep comms. So yeah, I think that what I want to share here is that even though building critical thinking or confidence speaking is something that seems like a snap of finger, but unfortunately for me, it took a lot of process too. And I hope that this can also help people, you guys out there, if you're still trying to have this kind of fear of saying that, okay, I don't think that I can be confident enough, or I don't think that I can be comfortable enough of doing debating, because it's something that maybe sounds like intimidating. But eventually, I really want to encourage everyone to still do this, because what I did was there are basically 3 steps that I did. First is that I tried to identify my weakness. So the issue with my speech back then was that, one, I was speaking too fast, I was stuttering, and I was low in confidence. So really, it was really, really bad. But what I did was that, other than trying to see, okay, it's just my weakness, but I want to put an action to that. So it's not just, okay, I have this kind of weakness, but how do I challenge that, right? The first thing I do when I speak too fast, okay, if I cannot control my speech, if I can, I still speak very fast, that means that I need to make sure at least my pronunciation is clear, so that the judge will be able to catch that. Because the issue is that when you are speaking too fast, sometimes the judge cannot catch that, right? So you want to make sure that at least what your delivery is something that is still clear. But also, secondly, when I feel, the reason of my stuttering and low confidence is because I was not as prepared. This means that I need to have a more structured notes, so that I don't blank out when I do my speech, but I write a lot more and I prepare a lot more. But also in terms of confidence, fake it till you make it. Basically, at least you will have a confidence when you are doing your speech. This will build up, because when you trust yourself that you can deliver during your speech, this is something that will make you, or like at least help you to build a lot more confidence, and you try to build upon that. Because when you feel confident in your speech and then you get a good result, that is when you are able to build your confidence more naturally, I guess. So what I did was that, okay, I identified my weakness, I tried something to mitigate that. But also, lastly, even after those kind of action, I still have to reflect. So this means that I record my speech, I do my speech from the feedback that I've received, and I also try to build a structure for my case building. So when you don't get lost, what I feel is that when I don't get lost in the case building, I try to build a structure. So what are the first minute going to do, what I'm going to do this, so that I don't feel lost, basically, so that I can feel a bit more confident when I'm preparing for my speech. And that's why it's very important to reflect as well and do that. So yeah, those kind of just quotes that I can say. If you cannot convince yourself, how will you convince the judge? That's just a jargon that I've learned from my friends, basically. So yeah, that's kind of thing that you want to learn, when you're starting off as a debater. Okay, so lastly is so just to wrap up, because I think I've a bit over time on the presentation. So lesson learned that I find is that, first, find your North Star. So for me, it's North Star means that you need to find your purpose, right? Why are you dedicating so much time to be in a debate? Especially when I have mentioned that it's taking a lot of taking a lot of time, basically to perfect it. I think that in my case, my North Star was on personal growth. So this kind of personal growth is not just achieving, for example, like 82 in WDC. But for me, it's a bit more philosophical, as cringe as it is. It's for me to learn, okay, I can be confident of my speech and I can be more content, even if, for example, I don't get the best achievement. For my case, thankfully, that is my North Star. So, but it's also up to you, if you want to try, okay, at least my goal is I want to participate in WDC, or I want to participate as a Poltex 3 delegate in NUDC, for example. That can be your North Star. And this is really important because you have to align your thoughts to make sure that, okay, even if I'm very tired or even though I want to give up, you try to look back to your North Star and make sure that whether I have achieved that or not. I think this is really important because it's something that can be mental draining in a debate. Critical thinking, confident speaking, it's a good thing that you can have, but of course the process in debate is something that realistically will take you a lot of mental space. So you have to make sure that you are aligned with your purpose. Secondly, I think it's really important is that never compare. Okay, so you can see, okay, my opponents are already doing this, they already achieved this, blah 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 blah. But it's very treat that as a white noise. Focus on yourself. Focus the energy to build on yourself. It's not just about debate, but I think this also confidence in general. It's very hard for us to not compare with others, but really just focus on the energy to yourself. Okay, so just focus on yourself to make sure that you can build a good speech. You are satisfied of your speech. You don't need to compare what kind of score that other teams that. But as long as for me, for example, okay, I don't care if other teams get these kind of scores, but at least I already get a score or like a result that I already aim for. Or for example, I was able to deliver a certain speech that I'm satisfied about, that I didn't expect myself to deliver those kind of speech. So those kind of things is really important. Never compare. Thirdly, preparation is everything, right? So be prepared because most of the time debate does not just come from the D-Day, but actually it comes from preparation. Because when you have a short time when you're building case building, that's when you have to have an archive of your structure, of your knowledge, of your framework that you can utilize when you are coming up with arguments or logic. So this is something that you need to have because the preparation comes not just during the case building or not just during the speech, but also before that you need to train. I think that having a lot of trainings or sparrings is something that really helps because it allows you to develop more, being able to improvise and being able to come up with different ideas that come from other people as well. So preparation is everything. Fourthly is that staying present. I think that when you come with a debate, it's really easy for you to overthink. For example, oh, what if my opponents bring this and I cannot tackle, for example. So I think I want to differentiate overthinking and preemption. So when you focus on arguments, when you focus on, okay, what can they bring and what can you do to preempt that, that is good. But when you overthink and you think, oh, what is the externalities? What if I'm blank out when they POI at me? Those kind of things, just keep it out of your thoughts. When you're case building, you have 15 minutes, focus more on your arguments, focus more on what you can do to prevent your arguments. So it will allow you to prepare more, or for example, be prepared on the scenarios that can happen in the debate. But eventually, focus on what you have right now. Don't overthink too much on the externalities that can happen. Okay, lastly, I think this is important to highlight because this built for me, this built a lot more confidence, but also critical thinking because my training that was given by my senior was that I need to keep thinking. I need to keep asking why, because it's part of the training, really. Because when you keep asking why something is true, why something is happening right there, why, for example, in your real life, you're questioning and seeing it, shouldn't it go like this? Or why is that the case? Try to think of what is happening on the other side of the coin, what is, for example, when A happens, you try question, why is it not B? What is the perspective of this other person that you have clashing views with? I think there's something that can build your habit easier when it comes to debate. Because when you keep asking, when you're habituated to keep asking why, to keep thinking, okay, why is certain thing happening this way or happening that way, you're able to build upon that when you come with arguments. So when you come with argument A, you can already, oh yeah, because in scenario of in the in topic of A, I was able to question a lot of different things, and eventually I was able to get that archive when I'm building my case. So this is something that I think can be good to adjust based on your life, but also in real life, but also helping you in the debate. So yeah, I think that's it from my case. What I want to lastly highlight is that I really encourage everyone to register, joining the debate community as well. This is UKM from Poltex 3, the EDS. I really encourage everyone to join because in my experience, it's not just about building myself to be more critical thinking or to be more confident, but also having the community, the environment to allow me to grow and also, help me accountable of when I want to slack off, for example. I really encourage everyone to have that community, to have the environment on your own. I think it's good that Poltex Sriwijaya was able to have their own EDS and, have this kind of initiative to encourage everyone to join the debating community. And we promise that it's going to be a fun one if you would, join debating community. So yeah, that's it from my side, Bakis. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kak Jose, for the presentation. And I think we can directly get into the Q&A session now. So for those who want to give their question, please raise your hand or just type in the chat box. But yeah, being on cam and okay, I think we already have the questioner here. Let's get Nur Reha Naulis Ramin from Polsri.
All right, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you about this. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nurhana Usami Sregar, a second semester Chemistry 1 junior student from Polytechnic Sriwijaya. First, I want to say thank you for the clear and informative session. Jose, it helped me understand the basics of debate much better. So I would like to ask, what is the easiest way for beginners to respond when they don't fully understand their opponent's argument during a debate? Yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll just go directly answer this. Honestly, I think that it's not that you guys don't know how to respond. I think that most of the times you're just not sure of which one to pick because it's not just about language barrier, but I think that it requires training for you to be able to understand what exactly are they pointing about. But for beginners, I think that when you are able to listen to what they want to challenge or what point that they have brought, always link back to your case. What I usually did is that first thing that I mentioned, so you try to disclaim that, oh, their arguments is not true. For example, basically if they are saying A, you try to you try to say, okay, A is not true. How are you able to prove this? I think that debating is kind of similar to real life, i.e., you try to get as much information that you have in the real life. So for me, it works like that. I mean, I don't need a very specific knowledge for me to tackle the argument. But when you are case building, I think that you already have that kind of knowledge in the first place. So when you're talking a certain debate, a certain motion, the first thing that I think it's not really an easy thing, but the easiest thing that I can think of right now when you're a beginner is that you try to challenge because I think that it's very intuitive for us to defend our own argument. So when you don't really understand what they are talking about, you try to look back to your case or you try to back to the motion, why eventually they are able to come up with that kind of argument. So that's what you can do, I think. When you you look back from the motion and you try to think why they can come up with those questions or come up with those claims. And that's why you try to link that to, oh, but our case is like this. So that means the right arguments that should stand or the right facts that should stand is ours. So if I can contextualize this, just compare this to, okay, so if you are government and you're opposition, and the opponents opposition and they claim A, right? For statement A and B to happen, it usually only have it's usually mutually exclusive. So if B is true, that means A is wrong. So when you are rebutting, you try to see how does B link to A. If A is if B is standing, if B is true, that means your arguments cannot be true and you will lose, right? When you have that kind of instinct to think that, oh yeah, if my argument is true, that means the things that they're saying is something that's wrong in the first place. So always think of why my argument is true and their argument is wrong. Dissect it by saying, try to dissect it in terms of relevancy to the motion and relevancy to your case. I think that's basically it. I'm not really sure if the thing when you say you don't understand it, is it because of the points that they're making is not really clear, or is it not really understanding what is the context of them questioning your arguments, for example. But if it's the second one, I think that you already know what to say, you're just not confident on how to do so. So I think the reference that you can take is that just look at the motion, look at how they're coming up with their arguments, and try to link it to your case that, okay, our case is still correct, yours is wrong, right? So you try, but not just saying that, oh, you're wrong, we're right, but you have to prove why they are wrong, because our case is A, B, C. So yeah, I think a bit too long on that, but yeah, I hope that answers. If it's the first one, you can just ask them to clarify, I think, if it's not really clear from their side. Yeah.
Okay. I think we can get to the next question. We will have Almira Mukjizatika from Semansa Madiun. Are you ready, Almira? If not, we will transfer the question to another person. Okay, I think we need to transfer it to Zayden. Okay,
Hey guys, sorry.
Okay.
I just got into my course, so I cannot open my camera. So I'm sorry. But first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Almira Mutsadika from Senior High School 1 Madiun. And for Kak Jose, I want to add something. So I sometimes got emotion where I instead agree with opponent position and make me don't know what to bring in my arguments. So I just flipping what the opponent say. And I'm fully aware that it's totally minus for me. So what should I do with my arguments if I got into that situations again? Thank you.
Sorry, can you clarify? I'm not really clear on the audio.
Oh, all right, sorry. So I sometimes got motion where I instead agree with opponent position and make me don't know what to say or to bring in my arguments. So I just bring flipping the opponent say, and I'm fully aware that it's totally minus for me. So what should I do with my arguments if I got into that situations again?
First of all, I don't think that flipping what your arguments say is something that is wrong. I think that's actually a really good strategy to say. So in debate, I think in parliamentary debate, it's similar. I mean, it's weighed similarly. So for arguments and responses, it's actually the same as long as you are able to make your opponent's case less convincing, right? So in your case, I usually do that as well during case building. So I'm not really sure what I can like add as much in a debate. So I just try to find I try to listen to my opponents, and I try to flip why something that is not true, and that's when I get it going, right? So when you are able to get a guess of, okay, I think my opponent just said this, and that's why on our side we have to flip it, right, the other way around, and that's when I try to build, okay, if this is true, then why is that better on our side? So the kind of structure that I've explained earlier, it actually also help you when you try to flip the opponent's case, because that means you have a certain burden that you need to fulfill, but you can also get the idea coming from what the opponent has said, and you try to claim, oh, that's not true, and that's not like that's less likely, because on your side, what is the likelihood? So try to build upon the narrative. I don't think it's something that's bad to do, when you try to just flip on the opposition's argument. But I think the issue sometimes is the amount of time that you spend dedicated to that, right? When you only came to the debate and you only listen to them, but what if you think from the case building what your opponents may bring? So for example, if it's more intuitive for you to talk about the opposition's case, or like the opposing views that is more intuitive to you, that you have more knowledge of, you can use that as a reference, but you flip that to your case during case building. So you already have an idea of, oh, I think my opponent is going to say this, so that's why what I have to do is that I have to do the other, I have to explain it the other way around. so that you are able to build to that. I think that's what you can do intuitively.
All right, that's just it. Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome. Okay. Oh, I think Balkis is. Okay, let's just take another question from Syed Ahmad Hanif.
Hello, am I audible right now?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Syatoman Hanif. You can call me Hanif. I'm from Computer Department in Polytechnic Negeri Sriwijaya. Okay, now just for your information, I've never done debating before in my life. So back in high school, I've used to do a lot of speeches, and now this year I'm about to join EDS, and so I'm starting my debating journey right now. So let me ask you a bit of a question. So what is your opinion, the number one top priority I need to learn about debating? You know, what is the number one thing I need to develop as myself to become, you know, like a great debater? Is it my ability to able to build arguments? Is it my ability to able to do, to compose myself even more? So what is your opinion about that? Thank you.
Okay, so I think I have a few experience with my friends that come from doing speech and then going to debate, right? So I think that for people who already did speech, they're really great at having this structure, having the idea of what to talk about. I think the thing that you need to prioritize when you're learning to debate was not just on the team building, because you are not just delivering your speech on your own, but also to your teammate. With your teammate, yeah, you're having to split the work. Oh, what I should talk about and what you should talk about. I don't think you will have issues in coming up with doing the speech itself. First thing you prioritize is that on by building the chemistry with your team, because you're doing this as a team now. But also secondly was to engage, right? Because usually speech, you're doing this on your own, and then you're being judged by your own speech. But debate, as I said, it's something that's dynamic. It's something that requires engagement. So you need to listen, right? So you need to be able to listen, and you will be able to adjust your speech based on what your opponents have brought. I think that building the structure for you would be something that is will be more intuitive, because you have been doing a lot of speeches before, right? But building the habit to listen and not just focus on your speech itself, but focus on what the opponents have talked about, what what opponents have talked about, and also how the debate is going, is something that you need to learn and pick up, because you need to adjust to the environment that is dynamic, that is engaging with a lot of more people. So not just focusing on yourself. But yeah, I think that's the two things that you need to prioritize first. That is something that will also take time, I believe. But yeah, you just do a lot of practices, because the thing with debate is that you don't just deliver your speech on its own, right? Not just in a vacuum, but also engaging to other people. Hope that answers.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Jangan lupa dicatat ya namanya, itu katanya mau daftar tuh UKM-nya.
Of course, Kak. Okay, next question.
I think I saw something from the chat.
Yeah, you can go with that, Kak, if you want to.
Oke, bentar. Fatima Zahra from Poltekkes Kemenkes Jakarta 3. In the debate training, there was a motion that Indonesia lacked health workers. According to the students, Indonesia lacked the number of health workers, but the jury trainer meant that Indonesia lacks the ability of good health workers. How can we understand the jury's intention, like a motion? Okay, I'll just assume that it's not really clear on what is the intention of the motion. Okay, so I think that in this case, when you are talking about the health workers, it's not just that, okay, it's just the number. So you want to ensure what is the benefit. I think this links to the neutrality that I was mentioning before. So if you, I think the mindset that you need to be shifted is that it's not just the wording per se, but what is the intention of that. And understanding the intention means that you want to get a certain benefit or a certain impact towards that, right? So the reason why the trainer meant that it lacks the ability of good health workers, this means to highlight the word good, right? because you want to ensure that when you increase the number of health workers, it's not just the health workers that increases like a lot more health workers, but why it can increase the quality of health in Indonesia. So you try to find the goal or the intent, like intention means that you want to find out what is the goal, what is the purpose of this motion in the end, why this brings a certain benefit. Yeah, of course, it's a benefit, right, that you want to achieve. Proving harms means that just trying to prove the value is bad, but what you want eventually to get is that in terms, especially in terms of policy, is that you want to get a betterment, you want to get a certain benefit that comes from that. So intuitively, it's not just talking about the numbers, but why this kind of number is something that's beneficial. This means the prerequisite, the requirement is that it has to be a good health workers, because you don't want to just have a number of health workers, but eventually it's just something that either not good in quality, for example, or it's also based on the prioritization. So if you want to say that, oh, it's okay for us to only focus on the numbers right now, because this is something that we actually need, even though the quality is not as good, for example, because the urgency, back again, in the urgency, what is the urgency, basically? If the urgency is something that is based on, oh, we need to fulfill this as much as fast as possible, that means that it's okay for you to prioritize the number, right? But if in the end it's a net benefit where you want to build upon the better quality of healthcare in Indonesia, that means then you need to highlight how you're able to get good health workers in the end. So yeah, that's basically, I think, I hope that when you are reading the motion, is you are able to identify firstly what is the urgency that need to be prioritized right now, but also what is the goal that they want to be achieved in this motion. I don't think that it's always it always work in, oh, what is actually the motion thought about, but what I meant by that is that you are able to build better when it's something that's more intuitive, because when they come up with this motion, it becomes relevant because it's something that's urgent in the end, or it's something that is currently happening, for example. So it's easier for you to think of the kind of argument that you can talk about. Yeah. So yeah, I hope that answer. Yeah.
Do you want to go with the question in the chat or see if someone will raise their hand, Kak Josie, for the next question?
Bebas sih tadi. I think someone was
Yeah.
raising their hands earlier. It's okay. Because I don't see any more in the chats. It only one, right?
There's Hafiz Muhammad Aska from SMA Home.
Okay. Hello.
Excuse me. So I'll introduce myself first. So I'm Hafi Muhammad Aska. Just call me Hafi. I'm from SMA Home. So it's in informal high school in Bogor, West Java. So my questions are quite simple. So it's about because of some my experience a few debate competitions before. Sometimes I saw people with a lot of data, but kind of less in framings or persuasiveness. Nah, and how to convince the judges with polished arguments, but without being dead on framings because of dadas like that. And yeah,
Okay.
I think it's really considerable, and how to avoid it anyway.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hafiz, for the question. So actually, this is something that I want to clarify as well. So for the type of debating that we are doing is basically parliamentary debate. So in parliamentary debate, we don't really focus on datas. That means that the type of valuation that was done is based on the burdens that I've mentioned. So based on the logical burden, why something is true, but there might be some data or like common data that you know. So because you're not allowed to research during the case building. So during case building, during the debate, you're not allowed to search for Googles. So that's why even when they are bringing data, there's something that is questionable for the judges. But also it's basically relying on a lot of logics. So that's why I think that there's something that need to be built over time, because the type of analysis that is done in a parliamentary debate is focusing on the logical or like the argumentation that can be done. Even though you can bring certain data to as an example or as a supporting evidences, but most of it is evaluated based on the logical. So if you are able to come up with convincing logics, convincing arguments, if you're able to prove that something is likely, something that is true, then you can already convince the judge as compared to your opponents who probably bring more data but not as much framings or weighings, right? On your side, you can just highlight, okay, even though they bring those kind of data, it's not something that is relevant. Even if that's true, you can just rebut it as usual. You can just rebut that, okay, the data that they're bringing, maybe it's not something that is true, or the data that they're bringing is something that's less relevant. What's most important is that even if those kind of data are true, our argument still stands because of logic A, B, and C. So yeah, that's basically what you can do when your opponents bring data, but less framing or less weighings, right? In that case, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Kak Josie, I think that will be the last question for the session. And yeah, thank you so much for your presentation, Kak Josie. We really appreciate it. It was
Okay, thank you so
wonderful.
much, Chris. And everyone, please daftar UKM IDS-nya ya.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please prepare your spirit of learning because we will start our next session with Marvin Tandy. I believe that Kak Marvin is already on the Zoom right now.
Yep,
Wait,
yep. Hi, I'm here.
Hello, Kak Marvin.
Hello, hello. My voice is audible, yeah? Just checking.
Yeah, very audible, Kak Marvin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marvin Tandy with the topic of learning to judge from zero, foundation of fair and logical debate education. Kak Marvin, please.
All right, thank you, Park. Yes, hold on, share this screen. Okay. This is visible, just to make sure.
It is visible, Kak.
Okay. There's nothing blocking the screen. It just since Zoom sometimes ada item-item if I'm opening anything from. Okay. Yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Marvin. I've been introduced about this before. My topic for this session would be judging from zero, the foundations of fair and logical debate education. Before getting into the session, I think there is a few things that I want to mention briefly just to get you in the right mindset when attending this workshop. Firstly, that this workshop would not dive detail into the rules of debating. So as you know, there are different parliamentary debate like Asian parliamentary, British parliamentary, and each format have different rules. So this session will not dive into the rules, but rather on the foundation and the logic that you need to have when you're judging a debate. The second reminder is that this is also a very fundamental workshop in the sense that you need to be able to adapt the skills and the mindset that you get from this workshop to the different formats that I've just mentioned before, especially make sure that you also read the briefing of each tournament that you're coming to. And lastly, it's just that this is just a general view of how I approach judging. There might be different approaches. Different rounds will need you to do different things. So again, the mindset for this workshop is that this will be the foundation by which you will be judging, or at least the approach that I take when I'm judging. Take it with a grain of salt, and yeah, just adapt to your necessary condition and situation that you're facing. Every round will be different, and be adaptive to that. As that said, the first concept I want to discuss is the concept of an ordinary intelligent voter. So I think some of you who have heard or maybe is familiar with debating already know what the concept of ordinary intelligent voter is. So hypothetically, the concept of ordinary intelligent voter is a hypothetical person that we make to standardize judges. As we know, arguments or cases are always subjective, right? Certain people will be persuaded by different things. There are different things that people like, people dislike, their personal political opinions and ideology that someone might have. And therefore, in order to make debating as fair as possible, to minimize the subjectivity of the judges, debates have one concept that every judge is to adapt, which is the concept of the ordinary intelligent voter. There might be different details if you read different manuals, but in general, the concept of an OIV is three things. There are three general things that an OIV must possess. One, that OIV must be willing to be persuaded by both sides. So an OIV should not be locked into belief system, into ideological preferences of cultural biases. So for instance, just because you are someone from Indonesia, let's say, an argument that talks about Indonesia is valued more than an argument that talks about the United States, for instance. Or maybe you are more progressive or more liberals, then you don't like arguments that is conservative, then you dismiss that argument. That's also not valid for a judge. You must be able to be open to both sides of the debate. You must be open to and willing to be persuaded by both sides of the spectrum. The second features of an OIV is that an OIV must be familiar with an issues and events that are making international headlines. So you're not just a random person on the street that might not know international relations or the concept of economics. You are still a person who are smart enough who can understand concepts that are familiar in international headlines. However, you should not use personal and specialized knowledge. What we mean by personalized knowledge is knowledge that is only known by someone who research or is in the subject for a long time. So for instance, if in economy, maybe the concept of inflation is a concept that is familiar because a lot of news talk about inflation, right? You read news about inflation all the time. But when we talk about the concept, contohnya quantitative easing, that's a very technical, very specialized knowledge of economy that not everyone will know. And probably even a first year major in economy belum pernah dengar the concept of quantitative easing. So yes, this is a bit vague description what is like considered as specialized and what is not specialized. But the general guidelines is that if it made international news, then it's not specialized. But if it requires some deep research, or at least you need to research its concept first, then it's specialized knowledge. The third thing or the third feature of an OIV is that an OIV must have advanced logic and reasoning skills. So they're just not someone who cannot think. In fact, there's someone who is very critical of different things. So you need to be able to exert logical questions. You need to be able to follow concepts that, if the concepts might be complex or you might not have heard the concept before. If a debater can explain it well, you should be willing to be persuaded by the concept. So for instance, you might not have heard about quantitative easing before, but if the debater can explain quantitative easing well, then there's no problem with that. You should be able to be willing to listen and to understand those concepts being explained to you as a judge. And thirdly, a judge should not give credit to claims appealing to emotion or authority. As I think Georgia already mentioned, debating is practice of logic, and so judges should value logic more than both emotion or authority. If you see there is a spectrum in the bottom, this is where the ordinary intelligent voter should lie, is exactly in the middle. You don't want to be a passive listener, i.e. you don't want to just, because team says this and they're immediately correct. Just because they say, oh, this will create world peace, and then you accept whatever they're saying. But similarly, on the extreme end of the spectrum, you should also not punish teams just because you think they are wrong. If the other team is not pointing out that they're wrong, then probably they're not wrong. You should not use your own knowledge. You should not punish teams because you think they are not making the argument that you would have run yourself in the debate. So an OIV should be in the middle. They should be critical, but at the same time, they should be willing to listen to what the debaters are saying and persuaded by what they're saying. So after talking about the concept of an OIV, the OIV should be your mindset for entering a debate as a judge. After you are an OIV, then what is credited by an OIV as persuasive? Again, debating is very persuasive and it's very subjective, and we're trying to make standardized or objective metrics of what we consider as persuasive. In general, the widely accepted metric for what is considered to be persuasive is three things. One is truth, or as we might heard, is the concept of likelihood. Second is the concept of importance. And third is the concept of relevance. Starting from the concept of truth. So, truth, or we also sometimes mention it as likelihood, is whether the argument is true or whether whatever the teams are trying to claim is likely to happen. Dalam bahasa Indonesia, likelihood means mereka bisa menjelaskan kalau argumennya terbukti dengan benar. A few guiding questions if you are trying to judge whether an argument is true or likely is the few that I put in the slides. One, you can ask if teams actually explain the logical process behind their claim. So for instance, they're trying to prove that banning smoking leading to people living healthy lifestyles, then probably they need to explain what are the harms of smoking. For instance, they explain that smoking creates damages your lungs. It is bad for your oxygen capacity, etc. And then banning smoking will make people smoke less because they have less access to smoking, and therefore overall health of the society will improve. Misalnya that's an argument that the team is making. You can see that they have logical reasoning behind the claim. You can see they have reasoning to back up and logical analysis to back up their claim. And therefore, they probably did quite well in explaining the logical process behind it. The second question you can also ask whether something is true or not is to ask whether they have characterization that back up their claim. So for instance, in debate about social movement misalnya, kayak kita mau bilang kayak, oh, a movement has to be more aggressive in the feminist movement, let's say, want to be more politicized or actively involved in electoral politics. The characterization might need teams who wants to say electoral politics will give benefits for women, has to characterize how does the politics work right now, how does the feminist movement have the capacity to opt into politics, have the resources to be persuasive in the eye of politics and compete against politics, etc. And so these are also the second guiding question you can ask to back up teams' claim. And third is the question of whether there are contingencies in an argument. So contingencies in an argument meaning that whether certain premises have to be true in order for their other premise to be true. Misalnya the motion this house supports girl boss feminism. A team claims that girl boss feminism will help women in workplace to get more recognition, or they would help women to climb the corporate ladder easier. Tapi there are contingency in the argument. The contingency is that claim has to be backed up by analysis to prove kenapa orang-orang will buy into the narrative of girl boss feminism in the first place, right? Just so if people do not buy into the narrative, however good or bad girl boss feminism is, it will change nothing, or the impact of, let's say, women getting better position in their workplace would not happen because people don't buy into the narrative. Jadinya there are contingencies there that teams need to move. What I'm trying to say with all these questions adalah, these are the questions that you can exert to teams, or you can ask yourself when adjudicating a claim that a team is making. Have they proven their argument, and how likely have they proven it? In this case, how much of the conclusion is true? Most of the time, they cannot prove 100% is true, but 80% most of the time is good enough. Whether you're still uncertain, right? It might be 50%. They might, in some instances, it might be true. In some instances, it might be false. We don't know, and that can be part of your adjudication as well. And the important thing, and I guess the highlight is, the bigger the impact that they're claiming. So for misalnya kalau mereka claim they will solve world hunger or create peace in a conflict, then probably they need more reasoning to back up their truth than the teams that claim, oh, kita bakal minimize casualties, or we will minimize damage to innocent civilians. Maybe that's a more strategic and smaller impact, and therefore analysis for likelihoodnya can be smaller compared to a team that claim they want to solve the war. Right? So just be careful in evaluating whether a statement has been proven or not. This question will help you, will guide you in asking the right question and exerting the right amount of logical question to the team making a claim. The second component of persuasiveness is the importance of an argument. So an argument might be true, but it might not be important, and therefore it's still not a winning argument. What are the guiding questions for you to judge an importance? First is the question of how significant is the argument with respect to the motion. I think often the fault here lies in actor motions. Misalnya in motion as Brazil, this house would impose death penalty for crimes against the Amazon. Gov might say that, oh, this is important for us to prevent climate change, or this is good for environmental protection. But opposition can say that Brazil would not only care about environmental protection, Brazil would also care about economy. The fact that Amazon can bring good economy benefit for Brazil, for instance, by selling the trees, by opening lands to build more factories, etc., etc. Those are also important economic benefits that come from the Amazon for Brazil. So just because a team claim, let's say, environmental damage is important in general, if you look at the specific wording of the motion, it might not be the most important argument. So be careful when looking at arguments. Make sure that it is important with respect to the motion and not only important in general. Second, and this is probably the most important guiding question, is that whether there are ways, whether it be explicit or implicit, given by teams. And I think Jose also mentioned a little bit about weight, that some teams will try to explain why their case is important, why their side is more important than the other side. Your job as a judge is not to have your own preference of what weighing is important. If teams say that this argument is important, make sure you take that into account and not dismiss it just because you don't think that is the most important weighing in the debate. The last is on whether the argument is exclusive or not. Sometimes a lot of teams make argument that is not directly tied to the motion. So there are other factors. And this is especially, I think, prone in narrative motions. Teams claim that this one narrative make people more productive. So this also supports cult of productivity or whatever. Teams claim that this is the only thing that make people productive, but probably there are multitude different factors that lead to productivity. There are multitude different factors that does not lead to productivity and counteract productivity. And so be careful when certain teams claim that the motion lead to certain impact, when that impact probably is not directly tied or not exclusive to the motion. That can also be one way for you to adjudicate whether the contribution is important. The last is relevance. An argument might be important, an argument might be true, but if it's not relevant to the burdens of the motion, that it also means nothing. The common mistakes that team makes is they often ignore the specific nuance that come from the wordings of the motion. Here are a few of them. Misalnya satu is the verb-based burdens. The example for verb-based burdens is this supports the glorification of something, supports the romanticization of something, opposes the demonization of something, etc., etc. It's not only an argument about whether work-life balance, misalnya, that in this context good or bad, but whether the glorification of it is good or bad. Teams can agree whether work-life balance is good or bad, but how does the glorification of that specific context changes people's perception of work-life balance? And therefore, an argument that explains why exactly the glorification is good or bad is more relevant than an argument that explains work-life balance in and of itself is good or bad. Hopefully that makes sense. The second type of common mistake is also in narrative debate. People take only the concept of narrative as true or false or as good or as bad and not talk about the narrative itself. Similar to the glorification part, people might argue in the second motion, being close to your family is good or being close to your family might be bad, etc., etc. But the debate itself should be talking more about whether the narrative that romanticizes family is good or bad. And that's where teams sometimes forget that main burden and only talks about the concept of family. And so again, the concept of relevant might be one of the ways in which you see whether teams' argument actually is relevant to the wording on the motion. The third example I give here is also motion on moral obligation or moral responsibility. So in this case, this believes that the West has moral responsibility to invade countries with sectarian conflicts. It's not just whether the help from the West is good or bad. Right? It's a question of whether the West should and have a moral responsibility. So it's not enough for teams to say, but the West have other priorities, or the West, let's say, will harm these countries. When the debate specifically talks about whether they have moral responsibility, which is a completely different case with a motion misalnya that supports the West doing this, right? Those are two different motions with two different arguments that will be relevant in the debate. Therefore, the underpinning ideas I want to emphasize here is that make sure that when you are listening to their case, be critical whether they are actually talking about the motion and arguments that are actually relevant to the motion, or they're actually talking about something that are less relevant to the motion. But again, be careful of being too interventionist. Just because something might not sound very relevant at first, misalnya, might get developed into second or third speaker and become more relevant moving down the bench of the debate. And that can also be the case. So don't discredit an argument just because you think it is irrelevant in the first place. Evaluate the debate holistically as to how the argument developed and how the relevance developed. Now, so after talking about those three concepts, a very useful way, at least for me, to think about arguments is to put it in the coordinate axis as you see on the right. So whether an argument is likely, whether an argument is relevant, or whether an argument is important, and then you put a point there, like where is it in that spectrum does an argument lie, and where is it in that spectrum does the opponent's argument lie? And when you have that placement, nanti kalian baru jelasin why do we care about argument being placed here in the motion than an argument that is being placed on the other place in the debate. Some caveats or some important things to note about persuasiveness. One, if teams have provided you reasons and analysis to prove their likelihood, you should not be thinking by yourself ways to rebut that or why that is wrong, right? If the opponent is not rebutting it, then probably you should buy that argument or at least credit that claims. Not even if you think that might not be the best analysis possible, you still need to credit for that analysis. Secondly, this is again a spectrum, not a binary. So an argument is not important or not important. It's not relevant or not relevant. An argument is maybe 80% important, maybe 50% important, maybe 50% relevant, etc. So this is not a binary. This is a spectrum that you have to engage actively when you're adjudicating for. The third thing to have in mind also to apply converse burdens. So maybe a team do not explain their likelihood, but if the other teams explain their likelihood worse, then they're not losing because of the likelihood. Yeah, or a team explain an argument that might not be very relevant, but the other team might make even worse mistake by explaining an argument that is way more irrelevant. So just because a team is not relevant doesn't mean they lose. You need to impose that same analysis or same reasoning for why a team lose to the other teams for not fulfilling this burden of persuasiveness. And lastly is for you to be careful to be able to read between the lines. Maybe some team will fail to prove what they want to say initially. Misalnya, the title of the argument is that, oh, we want to stop war. But if their analysis proves that, oh, we would reduce violence, then probably you should still be able to credit that teams are successful in proving that they're going to reduce violence as opposed to entirely stopping the war. So that is your job also as a judge to analyze to what extent has teams proven their claim and how far has they proven their claim. That was all in evaluating arguments. Now, what about responses, right? What are responses actually? Responses is, in the modern debating, anything that clashes with your opponent's points is considered as responses, even when teams do not say explicitly that they are responding. Similar to arguments, responses has to be evaluated in the same way that we evaluate arguments that I mentioned. A response has to be important. A response has to be relevant. And important, a response has to be true in order for it to beat the opponent's claim. Yeah. So it's not enough for them to question or just assert that, oh, this is wrong, your opponent is wrong. They need to have the same level of analysis for any responses to be considered as valid or an equal responses that you can credit against arguments. Responses also have a lot of spectrum. Responses might miss the entire argument. A response might only question the argument, making doubts to the judge. A response can mitigate the argument, or a response might completely destroy your opponent's argument. And your job as a judge is to evaluate to what extent has a response successful in doing so. In this spectrum, what is the response doing to the arguments being brought by the other side? And that's your again your job as a judge to be able to identify and critically analyze whether a response has been successful or not. These are common mistakes that I found for at least in some judges that I have met. One is focusing too much on heuristics. Heuristics means just focusing on technicalities. So a team loses because they don't fulfill their role, because they speak less than 7 minutes, they have more points, they have more analysis. They don't say this is a response, so I don't credit it as a response, etc. These are all outdated ways of judging. We don't judge by technicalities, we judge by content. What the speaker says, whether it's in bullet points, whether it's in paragraph, whether it's in story, misalnya, segala macam. All of them are still content that we should fairly credit. So don't make a team lose just because they don't deliver it in the way that you think should be delivered. Always holistic judging in a sense that you take everything they said into account. Second mistake is to let biases to get the best of you. And biases is not just about argument preferences. It's also about reputation. It's about institutional bias. Misalnya, this institution have very good rep, just won a big open competition, whatever. Or this style, you like this style more than the other style. They're more passionate than someone who is more, let's say, more technical in their delivery, etc. These are all non-biases that happen indirectly. You might not openly say that you win the seat because they are from this institution or because this is a good debater that you know. But that might get into your head when judging. Make sure you counteract, or at least you are aware that you have these biases and try to minimize those biases. The third common mistake is to have your own expectation. As much as possible, do not think of anything about the motion before you enter as a judge, right? You don't have preconceived bias that, oh, the motion is going to be harder for opposition, or oh, the government should fund this, or let's say in offline competition, if you're meeting with other judges, you talk to them like, hey, what you think the government should run, what you think opposition can do to like respond to this argument, blah, blah, blah. All of these are very dangerous because you come into the room with an expectation that the debate has to be like this, or at least you have an image of the debate. And I think anything that deviates from what your expectation can make you feel like the team is not fulfilling their burdens when in fact they are. So as much as possible, try to be, having a clean slate mindset as much as possible going into a round. I think that will really help you to like clearly evaluate what teams are saying and not what you think the teams are saying. And lastly, and this is I think the most important one, is to judge in isolation, meaning that you evaluate teams individually as opposed to being comparative. A debate is not won because a team is good. A debate is won because a team is better than the other team. A team should not lose because they're bad. A team should lose because they're worse than the other team in the round. Artinya apa? This means that you have to adjudicate, or when you value certain arguments, the argument should be valued with respect to the other arguments that come from the opposing teams and not the argument in and of itself. So teams cannot lose because you say kaya, oh, this team have bad arguments. The team should lose because the arguments is worse than the other teams in the three spectrums that we talk about. Misalnya the team have arguments that are less important, and so this team loses. Or a team have an argument that is less proven or less likely, therefore they should lose. So always be comparative, always look at arguments in comparison to each other as opposed to in isolation. Let's now talk a little bit about note-taking, because I think having a thorough note-taking is quite important for you as a foundation for you to judge. Without a thorough note, I think it's also hard to implement all the things that I mentioned before. What to write down when you're trying to note-take? One, make sure that you write what is being said and not what you think it means, because you might have a preconceived understanding of what they're saying. They might not be saying exactly what you think they're saying, right? Especially when you have to focus on timing, on writing down, on listening. There are a lot of components that you're doing at the same time. You're trying to minimize your biases acting upon your judgment, and therefore you want to try to write only what is said and not what you think they're trying to say. Secondly, what you also have to write is what you think about what the speaker says. And this sounds contradictory, right? Satu, you write what is said, well, what you think the speaker is saying. But what I'm trying to say here adalah, you write comments at the point of you listening to that speech. Kira-kira what are they trying to prove? Misalnya they're making an argument about social movement being successful in politics. The teams do not prove that, and then you can misalnya make comments. I sometimes put in question mark, kayak you can make comments. Do they prove the end that they want to prove? Are there reasoning given? Atau misalnya they don't prove their importance, blah blah blah. These are your comments on what you think the speaker is saying, but you still write down exactly what the speaker is saying. So you have a different sides, right? I use different colors usually for my comments and for what the speaker is saying. So in general, this is how you would note take, or at least how I would note take personally. One important thing about note taking is please be diligent. Don't stop writing because you're saying, oh, I will not think this is important. A material that initially you think is not important might turn out to be relevant later on. Tapi at the same time, also find balance between writing too much and too little. You don't want to transcribe the entire speech, but you should also not miss out on important nuances that speaker is making. So again, practicing obviously would help to find the exact balance. Whether you want to write more or write less, how much should you write? That requires more personalized approaches. You can test and try different methods. The right one is the one that I use for my own tracking or note-taking during speeches. I often divide a paper into two. So one for government side, second for the opposition side. If it's BP, I usually separate the opening paper and the closing paper. The reason for that is because so you can compare directly. Jadi kayak you have paper yang nggak usah dibolak-balik. You can see that on the left is your opening, on the right is your closing. Rather than you are reading your opening and then you forget because you have to flip your paper and then find the closing contribution. The second thing I also like to do when I divide it into two adalah, so every responses you can make arrow. What argument is this responding to, segala macam. You can track where arguments are going. I think that also helps for me personally. And the third is to have a separate master sheet. So once you are done with your tracking, or once you are done with, let's say, opening government, selesai ngomong, I often note down what are the things that they said, atau what are their contribution, and some comments that I think about those contribution in the master sheet. So that helps me when I'm trying to make an OA. I don't need to find all the notes that are like messy, but only like refer back to the master sheet where it's only the summary of each team's cases and to the extent they prove their cases. These are generally my approach. It is not the only approach. There are different people use different like approach for note taking. If you use laptop, it might be slightly different. To get test and try or talk to your friends, you might adapt different formulas according to your needs. The last thing I want to discuss dikit aja, I guess I'm doing over time, is how do you actually grow as a judge, right? The general explanation is obviously to practice. More judging will obviously make you a better judge. But these are 4 things that you can do. And these are not like, these are 4 independent things you can do. It doesn't have to be like this self-developed practice. And then it can be done at the same time. Personally, individually, you can practice both your listening and note-taking skills. The tips I want to give is try to diversify your sources of videos. Right now, there's so much debate online videos. There are speakers that speak fast. There are speakers who speak very slowly. There are speakers who are good at responding. There are speakers who are good at setting up the debate. There are different accents, speed, style. Make sure you practice your listening skills and tracking for those speeches. And practice just listening and get familiar to debating jargons or debating language that this debater use. There's so much online debate videos. It's so easy to find them. Just find them and then use it. And then you can practice yourself. The second thing you can do to grow is also to practice with other people, right? There are spars, there are competition. When you're entering such a spar or competition, make sure you ask feedback from your chair or even from the debaters. We might often forget that, debater always asks feedback from judge. But judge could also ask feedback from debaters or even from the chairs. You can ask, what should I improve more? Misalnya, I struggle in doing this in that debate. How would you approach it? Segala macam. You can learn from their experience. They would be more happy to like give you feedback and talk to you about their approach. Thirdly is to broaden your knowledge. As I mentioned before, an ordinary intelligent voter or the standard judge in debating is not your random person on the street. Is someone who is expected to at least have some knowledge and have critical thinking skills. How you cultivate those skills is by reading more, by familiarizing yourself with different things that is happening in the world, reading the news, keeping up to date, and all of those are important important approaches that you need to be aware of. If teams are explaining something and then you have ever read the news, then how would you be able to evaluate what they're saying is true or not, whether what they're saying is important or not, etc. Lastly is that just promoting this as an event that I'm also part in, which is IIDP by Argumentum. I think the poster is everywhere. That is a judging program, both intensively if you are like part of the program, or you can like sit into some classes. You can check that out. It's definitely a very good program for you to start having more detailed judging workshops as opposed to this. It's only 30 minutes. Those sessions would have like 6 classes for 2 hours every class, so there will be more details there. But yeah, feel free to check it out. Highly recommend that also for you to grow as a judge. Yeah, I think that's all from me. I'll give it back to Balkis for the Q&A section.
Hello. Okay, thank you so much, Kak Mafrin, for the presentation, and I believe we can get into the Q&A session now. For those who wants to deliver the question, please raise your hand or type in the chat box. But if you raise your hands, you will be likely to be prioritized. So, does anyone want to have the question? We will have it until 11 a.m. Oh, we have a question in the chat box. Kak Marvin.
Okay, agak panjang. Let's read it first.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so it's a question of reading script. First of all, ideally, a judge should not consider reading script as a mistake or a problem. Often, like reading script is completely okay. So I think in general, right now, judges ideally should not consider reading script as a mistake or as a problem or punishes team losers because they read script. So for the second question, personally, I'm totally okay with anyone reading a script. But obviously persuasiveness, especially kalau offline debate, right? If you're offline and you want to sound like you're persuasive, your body language on the reading script gets less, so you might appear to be less persuasive. So my take is that by not reading script, you get more persuasive. You can, utilize more body language, eye contact, etc. But reading script in and of itself is not wrong and should not be a reason for a team to lose because you're reading script. If you want to reduce reading script, I think the number one tip is to write less and write in bullet points. Because if you write in bullet points, then you only need to look at your paper for the main idea, and then you try to improvise the explanation on the fly. Yes, it is not easy, but I think practicing to like have more spontaneous speeches, misalnya, you only write the main idea of the explanation, and then the elaboration of that idea, you practice to elaborate that idea by not reading anything. Just just freely explain it without any text, without reading anything, and then from there, practicing with that method, I think will help you to be able to be more flexible or to be like less reliant on having scripts and bisa adapt on the fly to explain certain things. I think that would be my take on the question C. Hopefully that answers it for me.
Okay, I think Almira, you already got the answer.
Okay, thank you.
We're looking for the next question. Do you guys want to have some question? Okay, maybe while waiting for the participant to have a question, I would like to have my own personal question. So when we are judging or especially becoming a chair, this could be in an offline or online, when there is a technical issue like the mic goes off or the signal goes off, and during the speech, what do we do? Do we start or stop or pause the timer, or what do you do?
In online debates, yes, the first thing you have to do is pause the timer dulu, because you will have your own timer. So you pause your own timer, report to either kalau ada teammates-nya di room, you can ask the teammates where they go, right? Okay, you check with the teammates if they're there with them or whatever. Maybe they're in the same room but different devices, then probably you can ask them to use the the teammates' devices. Tapi if that is not resolved, maybe you can ask the organizing committee to find the missing speaker yang tiba-tiba disconnected. If OC, let's say, usually nggak bisa find the speakers at 2 or 3 minutes, usually a swing team will probably get into the room to replace them. Because cut-off time here usually 3, even max like 5 minutes for missing teams, and then if no, they will be replaced by another team.
Okay, this is very clear. Thank you so much for the answer, Kak Mafien. And I believe we have one question here from Kurniawati Seman Sumsel.
Do you think that judge can also be wrong to decide? I think a judge is not wrong or right, but whether their call is justified or not justified, in a sense that there's no like true rules of debating, right? Again, it's a very subjective sport. So putting it as wrong or right sounds a bit like making it as a 100% objective decision, which is not the case, especially in close debates where people might view certain things differently. However, yes, I do think a judge can have unjustified calls. For instance, if they cannot have a proper reasoning for why a certain team win, then probably that is not a justified call, in the sense a wrong call. But I would not call it wrong as in and of itself, right? It's more like unjustified, or the justification is, let's say, not clear enough, not justified enough. So yeah, that's how I would view a judge in terms of their call, as opposed to wrong probably is more unjustified and not justified well enough from the judge. How does that happen? I think there's a lot of components, and I guess if you are trying to be a judge, these are also the things that you can minimize to avoid making the wrong calls. One, often you track the debate in the wrong way. So a team is trying to say one thing, but because you're not tracking it the right way, you miss out on the nuances, or misalnya you miss out on the important point, a supporting point, right? Like, so one supporting point might be, might flip an entire clash, might flip an entire call because the supporting point is very strong, but you missed it because the speaker is going speak very fast talking about that one point or whatever. Or for some reason you are not focused on the speaker is talking about that, and then you just miss the point, and somehow you cannot justify the call for the team because you missed that one explanation. The second often mistake that happen if chairs are making unjustified calls, from experience, is, I guess, related to personal biases sometimes. Kayak when debates are closed, judges sometimes resolve or sometimes resort to using personal considerations. Misalnya kayak, oh, this should be more important than the other, atau this is more true than the other, when both of the team do not, both of the teams do not explain. Misalnya kayak the three things: likelihood, relevance, and importance. Sometimes teamsnya juga kan bisa aja miss, right? Not explaining those things. Dan kayak judge-nya sometimes juga kayak, I don't have any metric to judge. Then they resort to personal metric, which are often different from what you think is the metric that should be used and what the judge personally think is the metric should be used. And that might be unjustified because of the debaters themselves do not provide those metrics for the judge. In general, that's what happens in debates that you might think the decision is unjustified because they are different in perception and a mistake in tracking. Usually that's what happens gitu kalau ada unjustified calls. Hopefully that answers for Courtney. Thank you.
All right. Is there any more question, guys? Feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat box. I think they are having some time, Kak, to think for the question.
Yep, it's fine. I guess kalau misalnya mau pertanyaannya nggak usah it's only about judging, boleh-boleh juga sih. Kayak if judging is like debating is also fine. Itu ada Kirana di chat, I think boleh aja kalau mau on mic atau
Yeah, if you want to on mic, Kirana, feel free. Although you can open your camera. Atau kakak mau langsung jawab juga nggak apa-apa.
Okay, boleh. How to be present the topic. I think the first thing you can do if you're judging and debaters ask for feedback is to appreciate what they did well do first and foremost, right? Like they must be do at least one thing or two things they did good. Misalnya they have good structure, they have flow yang okay to follow, whatever. There are always good components to the speech that you can at least appreciate and highlight first. And then after appreciating what they're really good at, you can move on to explaining maybe what are the specific things that are missing. So you're not saying that they are bad or they're they're bad at debating, but you're explaining that there are certain components that are missing from the speech. So it's not. So hopefully by doing that, you're not saying, not attacking personally on their skills, but on like whether their ability to analyze something and what specific analysis that is needed. Jadinya mereka both understand and do not take it personally, but also can implement what you are trying to say or what improvement that you are trying to give them directly for the next round. So I think in general, debaters when asking feedback also understand there are something they're missing. So the mindset pertama is that often debaters would understand first and foremost that they have something to improve on. So you just need to like point it out that this is what I find missing. This is how you can improve it. And I think in general, people should already like be fine enough with it and not feel like too down. As long as as long as the delivery is not saying like you're bad or whatever. It just use like more objective metrics as in terms of what you're missing, what are the specific things that you can improve. Yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Okay, I believe that you already got the answer, Kirana. Oh, we have Indah Risnawati. You may please deliver your question, Indah.
I think inaudible, yeah. Sorry.
Yes, inaudible. Can you please turn on your mic? Still,
Yeah,
we
still
can still hear.
inaudible. Maybe buat di type di chat aja kalau misalnya mic-nya
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
work juga. We can move to like the ini ada yang bisa juga. I think while waiting, boleh move to yang next raise hand dulu.
Yeah, we can have Anissa Mizla.
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Audible.
All right. Hello, Kamarvin. I'm Anissa Mizla. Thank you for the change. So you spoke about how judge weigh argument naturally between mechanism and impact. Between mechanisms and impacts, which one should we prioritize more when elaborating our case to win the judge's heart? So yeah, thank you so much.
The answer is it depends. There is no one guiding question where it's always about impact, it's always about mechanism. Tapi in general, my guideline was for you to ask, if you ask someone like a neutral people or someone who is like neutral on the street, so you find some random people. And if you try to ask them whether they believe what you're trying to say is true, kalau in general mereka udah consensus that what you're trying to say is true, or at least more leaning to believing what you're saying is true, then probably you need to emphasize more on the impact analysis of why things are important. But on the flip side, sometimes things are already obviously important. Oh, sorry. I was muted. Let me just repeat the answer. So the answer for that question is that it really depends. It really depends on the motion, depends on what arguments you're running, depends on what the opponents are running. Tapi the general guideline I would give is that if you ask a random person on the street, both of the question kan, satu, whether they believe that what you're saying is true, because orang-orang obviously in general punya opinion. And kalau in general, majority of people in consensus that what you're trying to say is true, or at least most people believe what you're saying is true, then probably the mechanism nggak perlu terlalu robust. You still need to have mechanism, but it doesn't need to be very well complete because people intuitively already believe what you're trying to say. In that case, maybe you can spend more time elaborating the impact. Tapi in other cases, the impact is obvious banget. Misalnya protecting vulnerable communities, atau misalnya impactnya adalah increasing economic stability, atau preventing economic crisis. People already believe that those impacts are important. Tapi usually the question adalah how you actually prevent economic crisis, ya nggak sih? The biggest question adalah gimana cara kita prove mechanistically bahwa economic crisisnya bisa ke-prevent. Gimana caranya minority bisa get recognition. Gimana caranya kita bisa improve economic condition of the poor. These are impacts that we already know. The question is how we reach those impacts. Jadi in those instances, maybe you can spend more time in explaining the mechanism. So in general, the answer is depends. Once again, I think that should be the guiding question. If the impact is intuitive, spend more time on the mechanism. If the truth of the mechanism is intuitive, then spend more time on the impact. Hopefully that answers. Bisa Pak Anissa ya? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kak Marvin.
Okay.
Thank you to Kak Marvin and Anissa. And we can go with Indah Risnawati in the chat, Kak.
Cara menghindarinya sebetulnya karena debatnya udah kejadian, the only thing we can do moving forward adalah to ask the judges what they think or in what way they misrepresent your case. Misalnya kayak mereka tetap nggak bisa beli bagian sininya, atau kasusnya yang mana sih yang judge-nya nggak percaya misalnya. Atau misalnya musuhnya ngelakuin sesuatu yang lebih bagus dari kalian. Itu adalah hal yang bisa ditanyakan ke jurinya. Jadi make sure dulu ke jurinya apa sih yang kalian kurang. Coba evaluasi lagi ke argumen kalian. Tadi sebetulnya kita udah ngelakuin ini dengan benar belum sih? Apakah jurinya katakan itu sebenarnya valid atau enggak? Dan mungkin aja persepsi kalian, persepsi jurinya beda. Dalam kasus di mana persepsinya beda, ya mungkin tidak ada yang bisa diselesaikan. Kayak ya mau nggak mau harus terima aja hasilnya dan move on ke round selanjutnya. Tapi seringkali kita punya bias karena kita bikin kasus sama 30 menit, jadi kita udah terlalu terpaku sama satu kasus kan. Tanpa kita sadar kayak ada bagian-bagian dari kasusnya yang masih lemah, ada penjelasan-penjelasan yang belum dielaborasikan secara baik. Dan itu karena kita udah terlalu dalam di kasusnya, kita sampai lupa untuk bikin kasusnya lebih solid. Nah, ini adalah hal yang juri-juri bisa identifikasikan saat mendengar kasus kalian, yang kalian sendiri mungkin tidak bisa identifikasikan sendiri gitu, karena tiganya bekerja dalam tim, misalnya teammate kalian juga cara berpikir sama, bangun kasusnya bareng, jadi kita tidak sadar dengan kesalahan-kesalahan itu. Jadinya feedback juri sangat penting buat untuk ronde-ronde selanjutnya kalian identifikasi sebenarnya masalahnya apa dan apakah masalahnya valid gitu ya. Seringkali jawabannya adalah valid dan jadinya itu akan jadi feedback yang bagus buat untuk ronde-ronde ke depannya gitu. Kalian menghindari kesalahan yang sama dan lebih aware untuk tidak melakukan kesalahan itu lagi. Kurang lebih itu sih, karena apa yang kalian pikir tidak memuaskan bisa jadi sebetulnya adalah cara kalian buat improve di ronde-ronde selanjutnya. Approach-nya kurang lebih kayak gitu ya. Semoga menjawab untuk Indah. Kita move ke Shane ya.
Yeah, we can move to
Shane,
Shane.
ini raise hand juga, nggak mau on mic, boleh juga sih kalau on mic dulu. Atau ya udah langsung jawab aja. Whether an argument is sufficient. That's a very good question, by the way. Kayak satu, practicing will make your sense lebih tajam, will help you get more aware with what is proven and not proven, right? Like listening to more arguments, listening to how debaters explain things. Itu will help you. Your sense akan lebih tajam dan lebih aware with these issues. Tapi the usual thing that I think of when proving certain arguments adalah apakah analisisnya in general lead to the impact yang mereka claim. Ya, kayak kalau faktornya cuma satu dan banyak externalities-nya, then probably it's not sufficient. Tapi kalau mereka katakan punya 4 different factors that they explain will lead to certain argument or certain impact happening, maybe that's a good proven argument. So there is no general guidelines or objective guidelines that they have to have 4 points for an argument to be proven, or they have to have this type of analysis for an argument to be proven. Tapi when you look at the reasoning given, how much do you believe that those reasonings will lead to the claim that they're making? You see, the senses for this have to be built by practice, and there's no like true or like true guidelines for how you would approach whether something is proven or not proven. That would be in general what it is.
I hope it's clear, Chayin.
Yeah.
Okay, we still have 4 minutes. You guys can still deliver some question if you want to.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kak. I see where this answer.
Oh, ada yang bisa lagi.
Oh ya.
Ya.
Sorry Kak, aku mau tanya, kenalin, nama aku Muhammad Kiri Pratama dari Polsri. Aku izin tanya. Tadi sebenarnya ini kayak tips yang aku dengarkan dari Kak Jocelyn tuh bilang, yang terpenting adalah don't compare yourself with the others. But in my way, when I learning the bit, honestly, I'm comparing myself with others. It's because for benchmarking. So I can know that my capability and my knowledge and my critical thinking, it's I can measure that. Aku bisa ukur gitu Kak. Tapi gimana menurut Kak? Apakah emang kita benar-benar nggak boleh untuk komparasi diri kita sama orang lain dengan tujuan untuk mengukur, atau justru itu malah jadi jalan yang baik untuk kita tuh bisa berlatih, karena kita bisa lihat diri kita di orang lain gitu. Itu aja sih Kak.
Yeah.
Makasih Kak.
Jawabannya I think bukan gak boleh sensitif, tadi Joshua was more kayak supaya nggak terlalu pessimistic about yourself, tapi I think in general boleh-boleh aja as a general, kayak buat kalian bisa tahu di mana sekarang kalian, buat ukur like levelnya di mana dan apa yang perlu buat grow ke depannya, itu totally okay sih. I think for me justru banyak belajar dari kayak lihat-lihat debat-debat yang ada, misalnya debat-debat video yang ada atau gimana, terus kayak bandingin sampai yang kalian lakukan, itu seringkali jadi justru metode yang cukup efektif buat jadi lebih baik, khususnya as a debater ya. Kayak misalnya mosi yang sama, terus kita coba bikin speech kita, terus dengar speech orang lain, terus itu jadi pembanding, itu boleh-boleh banget gitu, apalagi untuk kalian identifikasi mana yang bolong atau mana yang bisa diimprove, atau kayak gimana sih debater yang bagus itu melakukan speech-nya. Mungkin itu secara positifnya, tapi ya sisi lainnya adalah apa ya, kalau secara aktif kita membandingkan dengan orang lain kan jadi mungkin agak sedikit mungkin kena mental lah istilahnya, kayak gak pede gitu segala macam, masuk ke ruangan kayak oh ini orangnya mungkin lebih jago atau segala macam, jadi kita gak pede. Tapi selama itu masih apa ya, dalam proses yang sehat gitu, tidak terlalu obsesif untuk membandingkan, selama itu cuma buat belajar dan berkembang seharusnya masih aman. Semoga menjawab ya. Ada David.
Oke, thank you Kak Marvin.
Thank you.
Memang kayaknya emang kita tuh, aku rasa tuh memang perlu tekanan gitu nggak sih Kak untuk kita belajar, karena kalau kita kayak nggak ngerasa insecure tuh kayak nggak bisa berubah gitu. Makanya kayak justru aku ngerasa normalisasi kalau aku ngerasa insecure ataupun ngerasa kurang, karena itu saatnya aku untuk improve gitu Kak. Kasih Kak Marvin.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Hadafi and Kak Marvin. And I think that is the last question for us today. And that is also will be the end of today's seminar. And I would like to say thank you so much for Kak Marvin for the presentation and the Q&A session. We really appreciate it. And
yeah, thank you, Walkias. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully the session also helps and see everyone in debate competitions.
Okay. In order to call this seminar, I would like to announce the best, four best questioner actually from Kak Jose's session and Kak Marvin's session, but because the best questions is being chosen by the speakers, Kak Marvin, I already sent the list of the questioners in our WhatsApp. You can tell me who will be the best question from there. Please give us a moment, guys. Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Kak Marvin. The name's already there. Before that, I would like to say, please do not forget to fill the present attendance list. It will be shared by the committee soon, and the certificate of participation will be shared too from the WhatsApp group by the committee. Please, you can find the certificate in there. And yeah, I shall announce the best 4 questions from 2 sessions. From Kak Jose's session, the best questions are from first, congratulations to Nur Reginauli from Polsri. And the second, congratulations to Hafi M. Aska from SMA Be Home. Congratulations, guys, for your question. And from Kak Marvin's session, congratulations to Chayin from Polsri and also Kadafi from Polsri. Congratulations to both of you guys. To gain the door prize, please kindly contact the committee. You can contact Husin as the chairman after this seminar to gain your door prize. And yeah, this will be the end of the seminar. And once again, let's extend our gratitude for our amazing honorable guests. We have Jocelyn Tay and Marvin Tandi. This is such a memorable and valuable experience that we have with you too. And for everyone, thank you so much for your participation and engagement today. Let's keep our learning ambition ignite along with us. I am Balkis Jaya Kautsar as the moderator, wishing the best luck for us. Thank you and goodbye. I'm giving it back to the MC. Thank you so much, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, this amazing event, the National Debate Seminar. We are honored to begin this journey in your personal growth.
Today for the presentation of our speaker.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully that we will open our cameras because this is precious moment, right? You know that we are standing with the church is inspiring person, so we have to capture. For committees, are you ready? Okay, if ready, I will count for 1, 2, 3. Okay, once again, 1, 2, 3. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I am Muhammad Kadi Pratama and my partner.
Amelia Krishna Mutiara. See you.
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.